Ms. Westcott, I believe you're presenting item Q, first review of a request for approval of an innovative program opening prior to Labor Day from Henrico County.
Yes, President Foster, members of the board, Dr. Wright, and I'd like to ask Dr. Patrick Russo, who's the superintendent of Henrico County Public Schools, if he will join me up here. While he's coming up here, I would like to recognize Mrs. Diana Winston, who chairs the Henrico County School Board. There she is. And Mr. John Montgomery, who's also on the Henrico County School Board, and I appreciate their being here.
Yes, welcome.
Let me just give you just a short bit of background information about this request. As you know, this is based on language in 22.179.1 of the Code of Virginia, which requires schools to start after Labor Day and provides for 4 exceptions to that. The first is that if the school division misses 8 or more days on average in 5 of the past 10 years, then it can get a waiver, and that's for the whole school division. That's pretty straightforward. The second is if there is a dependent program with a school division that has this waiver. In other words, we've heard about CTE programs today. Let's say a school division does not have a waiver, but their CTE program is with a school division that does have a waiver. Their students go to that other school division, then they can have a dependent program waiver. But that's a school-by-school waiver. If the high school gets the waiver, the middle school and elementary school would not necessarily, unless they also have a dependent program. I'm going to skip the third for a minute because it's a little bit more complicated. The fourth is that if a school division is totally surrounded by a school division with a waiver, for example, Harrisonburg is totally surrounded by Rockingham County, which has a waiver, and there are a number of other school divisions like that. There are 10. The third provision, and this is the one that's key here, it says a school division that is providing its students in the school year for which the waiver is sought an experimental or innovative program which requires an earlier opening than after Labor Day. And this waiver or extension of the school year granted by the Board of Education, again, shall apply only to the opening date for those schools where such an experimental or innovative program is generally offered in the school. Currently, there are 2 school divisions that have schools within this. Covington has 2 schools, Charlotte County has 6. Now, in addition, you'll read a little bit further down in that paragraph, there is a provision for year-round schools. That is considered an innovative program. Alexandria has 2 schools, Arlington 1, and Richmond City has 1. So I just wanted to go over what is required in the code for an experimental or innovative program. It has to be experimental or innovative. It is required, that experimental or innovative program is required to start before Labor Day, and the innovative program must be involved with every school that gets the waiver. Now, Henrico County is bringing its waiver request to you today for first review. The innovation is to start before Labor Day, and Henrico wants this to apply to all of its schools in the division. So I would like to present Dr. Russo, who will give you more information about this.
Great. Welcome back, Dr. Russo.
Thank you. President Foster, Vice President Beamer, and board members, and Dr. Wright. First of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to come before you and have our waiver for request for pre-Labor Day opening. It is our intention to show to you today the rationale and the reason for Henrico County schools requesting permission and approval of this. And at this time, I'd like to ask our chairman, Diana Winston, to come forward along with our school board member, John Montgomery, and they will make the presentation on behalf of Henrico County Public Schools. Ms. Winston?
Okay. Good morning, Ms. Winston, and welcome.
Good morning.
Mr. Foster, Mrs. Beamer, nice to see you today. Members of the board, Dr. Wright, we certainly do appreciate the opportunity. And Mr. Foster, I'm glad you're in such a great mood that you want to go outside of your agenda and go ahead and act on a first review. So let's just keep moving in the spirit of that.
We can act both ways, of course.
That's true, too. And we can still continue to act. So we can do whatever you would like, sir. I come before you today as the chairman of the Henrico County School Board and respectfully request that you consider and grant Henrico County Public Schools waiver to allow us to open school before Labor Day. I am appealing to you, and that's why I am standing here, board member to board member. This is not superintendent to superintendent. And I am asking that you grant us the autonomy to determine what is best for the students in our locality, as we have been charged to do as elected officials. Dr. Richardson stood up here and talked about his board chairman with her finger in his back. Well, Dr. Rousseau has 10 hands on his back. That's why the school board, this is a school board-driven initiative. And we feel very strongly about the need to look at this for our division. It would be very easy for us and for you just to dismiss this waiver request under the theory that the legislature has already spoken this year on this issue. But today, I'm imploring you, I am challenging you to support the idea that local bodies be allowed to determine local policy. Our local governing body, our local school board, knows best the unique demands, challenges, and goals facing Henrico County. You've heard a presentation from Mr. List today about economy and industry in this state. I happen to be one of the ones old enough to remember when we did start school before Labor Day. And when Memorial Day came, school was out for summer, and summer vacation began for everybody. Of course, we did not have the required testing windows that we do now, that fill up a lot of our school year. I understand the value of tourism, but I have just completed 3 years of work on the 400th Anniversary Commission for Henrico County. And there are many tourist venues in Henrico County, and we certainly don't want to do anything to take away from those local venues. But what we have found is that 70% of the people who take advantage of those local venues do not have children in school, in the school system. These are people like myself, senior citizens whose children have gone on, or young families who do not have to worry about the school system and following the school system's calendar. Does the calendar have an effect on a family's economy? Certainly it does. When you take vacation, and some of our vacations are in peak economic times, and they cost more to do it because of that. Nobody is more in favor of the economy of Henrico County than Henrico County School Board. 55% of the budget of Henrico County government is funding Henrico County public schools. So I am not here. You do not see members of the Board of Supervisors or our county manager here in opposition to this. You will hear, if you were to listen to us on board docs, me as a chairman and my colleagues say, think, shop, live Henrico County. I'm going on vacation tonight after the meeting to my home in North Carolina, which starts school before Labor Day. And most of my shopping I've done here because I want my tax dollars to stay right here in the state of Virginia. I don't want to pay the 8.5% that I have to pay in North Carolina. I know how important that money is to us as a school board. The next thing that I would like to bring to your attention, and this is something that you might think that a board would have a hard time talking about, but we're going to talk about a tough issue right now, and it's an issue that we've been talking about. Henrico County is not the same county that it was 10 years ago, and Census Bureau information will certainly document that. We are a majority-minority county. Some of you sitting on this board represent counties that have no majority. You're totally comprised of minorities in your particular school system. We've changed drastically in our demographics, and we've changed drastically in our socioeconomic makeup over the past decade. Our board, starting back in November, has openly and boldly addressed the gaping and the glaring achievement gap that exists between white and black students in Henrico County. Now, you may say, Mrs. Winston, we're looking at your data, and all of your subgroups are outperforming the state averages. And you are exactly right. We are in all areas. Even looking at SATs, ACTs, whatever the measure is, we are certainly doing better than these averages. We are so responsible to the economy of this county. We know that when people come to locate for businesses in an area, one of the first things that the other spouse is going to ask, or the other member of the family, honey, What about the schools? What are they like? And it is our goal, as a part of our strategic plan, we want to be the premier school system in this locality, in this state, and in this nation. And we feel as a board, it is our responsibility to advocate as strongly as we can for that. We have had 2 public meetings already inviting our local government officials, community members to come together and discuss how do we put the boots on the ground to close the achievement gap in Henrico County. We have been monitoring this for the past 5 years, and in the past 3 years, the gap continues to widen. Now, this is not a local problem. This is a national problem that we have in this country. And we, as I said, I believe are being very bold and coming out and saying, we know that we have this problem. We are particularly alarmed by this, and this district-wide movement has just proven to us that there are plenty of people out there that support us. We've openly called on community leaders, church leaders, business leaders, parents, administrators, and students. We've involved students in all of this. They have great ideas on how we can bridge the achievement gap. And we are asking that you work with us and allow us the leeway to add this instructional time prior to SOL achievement tests to help us accomplish this goal. I know you have your waiver before you. I see some of you, or our waiver before you, flipping through it. And Mr. Montgomery is going to speak to the innovative part of the program. I mentioned standardized tests, and you know that we as school divisions are locked into calendars based upon standardized tests. We don't have the freedom to say, well, I'd like to give the SOL test on June 5th. We're getting out on June 18th, and boy, school will be out for summer when we finish that. We don't have the opportunity to do that. Same thing with the maths testing, AP testing, IB testing. All of these things are determined nationally, locally, that put a hamper on the school calendars. We want our students to participate in as many AP programs as they possibly can. You know that it was a particular goal of Governor Kane to have as many students in AP courses as they could be in. We find that our private schools, and there are a lot of private schools that surround us in Henrico County, begin school before Labor Day, and their students have an opportunity 3 to 5 times to practice for these tests before they actually sit for them. If you were to ask our students, how many times have you practiced for this test, they will tell you none, because we're teaching to the day of the test because of the material that we have to cover. Another argument is in support of the Labor Day law that we often hear is that by us starting in mid-August, we're going to interrupt family vacations. Well, I say to you as an old school person, having worked in schools for 30 years, when a family has a vacation opportunity, a family is going on vacation, regardless of what the school calendar may dictate. And the family, in 9 out of 10 instances, is going to ask that their child's work be provided by teachers during this time while they are gone. So I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong. I'm just telling you that is the reality of it. If you do not uphold this, if a family had an opportunity to go on a vacation September the 5th through September 20th, they're probably going, even though we open school after Labor Day. So again, I am asking that you respectfully support us by giving us the autonomy to implement what we feel is the best instructional model for us to succeed on any type of measure for all of our students. The other point that, again, most of us probably as educators don't like to admit, but we'll go ahead and admit it in Henrico County. Those 2 weeks following the testing window, I'd be willing to bet you that most of the students in Henrico County know where to find Nemo. That time is often spent as teachers are creatively trying to hold the attention of students, hold them captive by trying to find the literary credentials or whatever that it would put together a Nemo experience, the science connections, whatever it might be. And we are saying to you, we are asking for this 2 weeks to come onto the front end of our calendar, where these will be planned instructional days, not that the 2 weeks after are not. They certainly are planned instructional days. But we're asking for an additional 2 weeks that we can put boots on the ground with an outcome that students will be able to realize. Thank you for giving us this opportunity this morning. Mr. Montgomery.
Thank you, and welcome, Mr. Montgomery.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and may it please the board. I'm John Montgomery. I am a member of the Henrico County Public School Board, and welcome the opportunity to share a few minutes with you. I do want to focus for a few minutes on one particular aspect of our application and tell you that when Governor McDonald was sworn in and mentioned and made a goal of increasing the number of college graduates by 100,000, it was a goal that we in Henrico County Public Schools took seriously. And we took it seriously not only because it was a charge of the governor, but because it was a worthwhile charge for our county, our state, and our nation. And one of the things that we've done to try to reach and help accomplish that goal is to create a program, and we believe it's not only innovative, but it may be one of a kind in the nation, that is currently housed at J.R. Tucker High School, called the Advanced College Academy. And it is not, you know, the gentleman from the Innkeepers who spoke earlier today, and I'm disappointed that he's not here because he either has not read our application or this portion of it, or deliberately misunderstood it, perhaps. But this is not a situation of dual enrollment courses. In fact, this is a case where our students will be completing the J. Sargent Reynolds College program as part of their high school curriculum. It's not simply dual enrollment. It is meeting the governor's goal of 100,000 college graduates in a unique and perhaps one of a kind in this country, in this educational system manner. So if it is not innovative, then innovative has no meaning. In fact, it is more than innovative, it is unique. And in order for us to accomplish that, we're beginning our second year of that program. And it's presently at J.R. Tucker High School. And you're probably asking yourself, well, Mr. Montgomery, aren't you simply asking that J.R. Tucker High School begin earlier? And by the way, the gentleman who spoke earlier mentioned that we were presenting you a red herring. I suggest to you instead he has presented you a straw man. He suggested that if you look around the locality at the colleges that have dual enrollment, again, it's not a dual enrollment program. But if you look at those colleges and those universities that we share some of those things with, that you see there's not a uniform starting time. Unfortunately, we're not talking about all the colleges and all the universities across the area. We're talking about J. Sargent Reynolds. And so while he was saying that, I was looking on my computer, and I will tell you, and you can check me if you wish, but their classes begin August 20th, 2012. Labor Day is September 3rd, 2012. So regardless of what is going on, generally speaking, specifically speaking, on our unique, innovative program, our students will need to start to be in line with their peers who are also taking college courses on 2 weeks before, on August 20th. So what he has suggested to you is misleading at least. So why don't we just do J. Sargent, I beg your pardon, why don't we just do J.R. Tucker High School? Well, folks, we have made a commitment. Sir, you asked earlier, how is Fairfax meeting its responsibility to make sure that all of its students across the board, regardless of what corner of the county they live in, are able to participate in their program that they're bringing forward? We've made a commitment in Henrico County that regardless of which end of the county you live on, regardless of which high school you would ordinarily be zoned to, that any program in the county of which you are able to qualify, we will provide the transportation, the infrastructure necessary to get you there. And I can tell you we live in a rather large and lengthy county because I live as far, there's nothing between me and Charles City except a row of corn. And there's nothing between me and where my 16-year-old has fallen in love with a girl on the other end of the county except highway. And it takes 50 minutes to get them together when they want to do something on the weekend. So I know the distance. But we have committed to make that available for all of our students, and we do that. So if we're going to do it at J.R. Tucker High School, and we're going to make sure that that student at Verona High School or Deep Run High School or any other high school in our county has the ability to do so, then we have to open that school in such a fashion that they'd be able to do so. So we bring all of those kids together. Well, what else happens at J.R. Tucker High School? We also have a commitment that all of the students there, if they wish and if they qualify, will participate in career and technical education. Well, career and technical education, folks, is offered primarily at 2 locations, Hermitage High School and Highland Springs High School. We look for opportunities to expand it wherever possible, but that's there. So now we have students who, if they go to J.R. Tucker High School and who wish to participate in the CTE programs, would be beginning their school year and ending their school year 2 weeks prior to their colleagues. And then you would ask, well, why don't we just do it for high schools? Well, I would suggest to you that those of you who have been involved in managing a school system, that when you're using the same buses and the same personnel and the same other items to operate a school system, that what you're suggesting and what the gentleman from the innkeeper suggested is logistically nonsensical. And so our innovative program in fact dictates that if we're going to be able to do it and make it meaningful for the most students possible, for all the students who qualify, that the only way that we can do it is to begin school 2 weeks earlier before Labor Day. And so we would respectfully ask that as you look at this, you look at how it's all intertwined together. You look at the fact that we're committed to making sure that each and every student has that opportunity. And we're trying to find ways to expand it. We're going to expand it to Highland Springs High School to cut down on some of the logistics. But nonetheless, all of a sudden here'll be another school that you would ask us, or the gentleman would suggest we simply start that high school earlier. I tell you, and you know this, that would tear at the very fabric of a local school system, a system with over 90 schools. It would be an impossible burden, an impossible task. So if you believe that the ACA is innovative, which I would suggest to you, I would challenge you to argue that it's not innovative. If you believe that it's innovative, and you support it for all of the students for Henrico County, then I don't see how you can do anything but support our request for a waiver. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Westcott, did we have any follow-up from you?
I do have the superintendent's recommendation. The superintendent of public instruction recommends that the board accept for first review Henrico County Public Schools request, provide feedback on the proposed innovation as it relates to the statutory requirements, and discuss a timeline for further review and action.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Westcott, and thank you, Dr. Russo, and Chair Winston, and also Mr. Montgomery for taking time out of what I know from personal experience is a lot of juggling of schedules to be with us today and to work on this proposal. I want to ask a question of you. Whoever wishes to, maybe all 3 of you, respond for the system, just to help me understand the issues as we get into this. And I want you to understand the question comes from someone who, like I think most or maybe all of my board members, is sympathetic to the goal of local divisions having more flexibility regarding when to start school. And I know this request comes from an excellent school system. If I didn't know it from reputation and the data I see, I would know it from being reminded constantly by Mrs. Beamer, a satisfied parent, what a great system it is. And having twice chaired a local school board myself, I certainly am doubly sympathetic to being able to determine these things without Richmond dictating them. But I also, when I joined this board, took an oath to uphold the law of Virginia, and we all have to apply it to this sort of request because we do have a very specific statute. And here's my threshold question so I understand the request before us. Regardless of whether we deem the program experimental or innovative, and whether it requires an earlier opening, which are parts of the statute and some other things we'll talk about here, the statute does seem to say pretty clearly that any waiver we grant, I'm just going to quote the act, shall only apply to the opening date for those schools where such experimental or innovative programs are offered generally to the student body of the school, end quote. Now, if I'm hearing you correctly, there's no claim that the program is offered to any elementary or middle school students. So how do we, consistent with the law of Virginia, even if we agree on everything else, which I'm not prejudging it at all, grant a waiver to any elementary or middle school in the county?
President Foster, we have presently 12 specialty centers, both in our high schools, and then we have a number of specialty centers at our middle schools, all intertwined together, so that as students are coming through the middle school schedules, they are actually working towards these other specialty centers at our high schools. So when we talk about International Baccalaureate, or we talk about the Governor's School and all those things that are available to middle schools, they are working towards those programs in a very concise manner. So we see a very much of a fabric that moves from elementary school to middle school to high school with any of these programs that we're speaking about. And as Ms. Winston said, very specifically towards student achievement. And we know this governor, and we know this board, we know this state superintendent have focused on the ability for school divisions to improve student performance. And that's where these innovative programs have been created, and that's where we believe the innovative programs will continue to demonstrate increased student performance now and in the future. Good.
I guess another point to make about our achievement gap is the concern that we have in particular about black males in our school system. The op-ed editorial in yesterday's paper was extremely compelling about the number of black young men who are killing black young men. These young men have to be educated. We have got to provide the mentors to help keep these young people in school. We have strong mentoring programs across all of our schools. We have all types of community involvement across all of our schools, with our goal to get all of our students to realize the value of an education and to graduate. So again, I second what Dr. Russo is saying. It's all, I mean, we have pre-K, and we start speaking with parents about these opportunities that will be available to their children. And this is the course that you have to stay on to do that. We have middle school International Baccalaureate programs, which feed to the high school International Baccalaureate. And then the economic factor that Mr. Montgomery mentioned as far as fiscal responsibility goes.
Well, I do understand the arguments as educational policy matters for those types of earlier openings. And indeed, I can add others. Second language learners are away for a shorter period of time. But the same governor to whom you alluded and whom appointed me, and I applaud Governor McDonnell for carrying this to the General Assembly, trying to get this changed so every district could decide on its own, failed to do that. General Assembly spoke again, and we still have the language that I read to you, and I'm having a hard time seeing, and then I'm going to open it up to see where others are, but I wanted to give you a chance to tell me first how I could say that the program in question, this is the language of the statute, the program in question is offered generally to the student body of the school when I'm talking about a middle or an elementary school. So as you think about how to present this and whether you want me to vote on first review today, Chairman Winston, that is a threshold issue that I'm having a hard time understanding.
And please be clear that there is a twofold part of our application. There is that which I focused on, which is the Advanced College Academy, and I believe it on its own should carry the day. On the other hand, Mrs. Winston and the application goes into great detail about the broader, and of course innovation is such a broad definition that we believe that innovation, by being able to begin, we haven't done it for over 20 years, so it's innovative to Henrico County to begin as we're asking to be done. And so that would apply across the division as well. So I want to make sure that it's clear that it's twofold. While I focused on one part, there's broader portions as well. And I do also, Mr. President, want to say that our goal is not to upset the policy what the General Assembly has set forward, because that's an unachievable goal among us, no matter how much we may or may not agree. However, we do believe that the spirit of the innovation exemption is one which we are falling under, and so we would ask that the spirit be applied in both the letter and the spirit of it to grant that. So that,
Okay.
Again, it is twofold.
Well, thank you, and I'll go with you to the General Assembly next year to lend my personal support for what it's worth, but in the meantime, I just want you to know what we're wrestling with and applying the law. I took the name of my Vice President in vain earlier, Ms. Beamer.
Thank you. You helped me to not have to repeat, but I will, that we have 2 daughters in the school system and are thrilled with the education that they receive there. I too find it amazing and annoying at this time, not to be totally disparaging in the General Assembly, but that my local school board cannot pick when my kids get to start school and finish school. But that's the way the rules are written. And I think it's getting lost in translation here that, you know, they get to make that decision based on their opinions, their constituencies, their unencumbered with the limitations that we have. I hate it, but we have to be picky. We have to be picky on this. The statute, that's not a very academic word, but that's my word, that we have to follow this by the line. So in trying to work to find a way, because I personally would love my kids to start before Labor Day, I do have a question on the Advanced College Academy. It is in existence now and was in existence before you have brought forth the waiver. It will stay in existence if the waiver is not granted, correct?
Well, ma'am, it will begin its second year next year. Where it really becomes critical in its interaction with J. Sergeant Reynolds is in its third and fourth year. And frankly, while we recognize that was going to be an issue, the issue is become much more acute and also much more troubling than we thought it was going to be to begin with. We will work very hard to try to find a way to make sure it goes forward. We're committed to it. We're committed to it for all of our students. But it is going to take, it's going to take an extraordinary effort to do that, because those students will have 2 less weeks of instruction time than their colleagues and their peers in college who are going to be taking the same courses. And again, they're already taking a highly demanding course. So you could say, well, just put the pedal down harder, but that's not necessarily a good solution. But so we are committed to it. I'm not certain how we're going to work it out, but we've been innovative once, we'll be innovative again. So.
Mr. Braunlick, and then I'll come back, Rob.
Thank you. There's a great deal that was said by the gentleman from the hospitality industry with which I do not agree, but the one thing that he said that I certainly do agree is that this issue for us is not about whether or not we support Labor Day opening. It is about whether or not we can do this. Chair Winston, you earlier asked us to grant you autonomy. Earlier in this meeting, we passed 4 agenda items moving us down the road to changing our regulations because we are mandated to do so by the General Assembly. There are a great many things we don't have autonomy in, and one of them is to grant you the autonomy without specifying the issues contained in the law. And when I've talked to folks, we've all struggled here with trying to figure out a way to thread the eye of that needle to grant you this. I went back and staff was kind enough to provide us with a sort of history of waivers that have been granted in the Commonwealth. And when I look at the ones that have involved dual enrollment type of things, college preparation material, there has been a consistency in that they involve physical presence on college campuses. They involve mentorship at the elementary school level. There is almost a seamless program that goes from elementary to post-secondary. And my problem is here that I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing a program that's housed at J.R. Tucker, which suggests to me that the students don't go to J. Sergeant Reynolds to take those courses. And I don't see a presence in the elementary school, both of which might, I don't know, but might give us a reason to grant this, but it's not there, and that's what I struggle with here. You've had the program for a while. You presumably will hopefully be able to continue the program for a while. That's my issue. I don't see anything that matches the letter of the law and allows us to find that exception.
Well, and I do want to be clear that it is housed at J.R. Tucker High School. The professors actually, or the instructors actually travel there, so we believe it's a better model. But you're accurate otherwise. But I did want to make sure that I was clear as to how the program is melded with the college. I do also want to suggest or ask that it is an application to be taken as a whole. It seems to be some consideration of whether you could carve out the high school or something of that nature, but we would like for our application to be considered as a whole and for it to be voted on in its entirety whenever you come to the point. And Frankly, we will work, as we have with staff, to address concerns that may be. We recognize that you, just as we are, have certain limitations and requirements that tie our hands or perhaps loosen our hands, as case may be. But nonetheless, we look forward to a vote on it because, frankly, one of the things that General Assembly members have told us in the past, have told me personally, is, well, Mr. Montgomery, why do you want the lobby to change this when all you had to do is go ask for a waiver, and none has ever been denied? And so perhaps...
Where were they during the recent debates?
I'm not sure, but if they tell me that going forward, we have made an application. We believe it is in the spirit and tone of the law, and we would ask that it be approved in its current status.
Did you have a follow-up, Mr.
I
Bartlett?
just wanted to comment that I'm confident that some have been denied, but let me say that if the legislator who said that is a senator, if he will send us a letter co-signed by 20 other senators, I'll give even more consideration to it because that's a majority.
I agree.
Okay, Mr. Krupika.
As someone who actually spent a decent bit of time during the last General Assembly session trying to find votes to overturn this law, I'm very sympathetic to everything you all have said, and I think you make great arguments for why the law shouldn't exist. I think the challenge is your arguments are much more about why the law shouldn't exist and a lot less about how do we apply the statute. And it's a little bit like arguing that we don't want a 25-hour speed limit to the judge instead of to the guys who put the speed limit in place. And we're the judge in this case. We don't get to change the mile an hour speed limit, no matter how good an argument you make that it should be 35. Someone else has to do that. And I may want it to be 35, and I think a lot of my colleagues may like it to be faster, but we don't have kind of the luxury of that because that's not the role we've been given. So I'm struggling. I have to say, I don't think you've made a case for the elementary and middle schools. I understand the logistical issues. I think we're all very sympathetic to them, but we have schools throughout the Commonwealth who have, our school districts throughout the Commonwealth who have 1 or 2 schools that have waivers that deal with the bus logistical issues and other things. Not easy, not simple, but I have firsthand experience because my daughter goes to a school that has a modified calendar and they have to deal with the buses in Alexandria and they figure it out. It's not ideal, but it can be done. So I would argue, to you, or I would encourage you to think hard about the elementary and middle school portions of your application and how you can actually tie them to a specific program as opposed to making logistical arguments. I think the logistical arguments make perfect sense. I just don't think we're given the ability in the code to make a logistical judgment. The code doesn't say, is it convenient to be open before Labor Day? The code doesn't say that. If the code said convenience was the test, we could easily do these all the time. I do think when it comes to the program with the community colleges that you could, at least in my view, create an argument that I would potentially be receptive to. I can't speak for my colleagues. I think the challenge there is clearly articulating how the relationship with the community colleges mandates that earlier start and why the community colleges are not able to accommodate another circumstance. But in my view, the statute provides an opening for that. And I think that to the extent you all can kind of clearly articulate why it is and have some statements by the community colleges about why it is that you have to start before a certain date in order to have the kind of partnership you want to have and provide the kind of program you'd like to provide. I think that gets into the realm of where the General Assembly's intent gives us some pretty clear flexibility to kind of determine something's innovative. I don't feel like you've been as specific about that enough yet for me to really understand what it is that drives that date. But to the extent that case can be made, I'm open to the high school argument because I think that there may be some room there. And I'll just leave it with this. I would very much not like to have to be in this position because my view is you should be able to do this. I had a lot of conversations with General Assembly members who were very clear with me that they felt if a school district were substantially increasing instructional time in their view, that's a no-brainer, and we should let them have start early. But in this case, we're not talking about a substantial change in instructional time either, which I think creates a real challenge. I'm just trying to find a hook that I can get excited about. So I would encourage you all, to the extent you want to continue this application, to really look at how you can make the argument about the community college partnerships as strong as possible, because I do think there you may have some real, at least in my view, as one person, you may have an opportunity to make a good case. Dr. Kennedy.
I can't believe we're in the 21st century still talking about who decides when school opens. And I've been on both sides of this. I've been on the side of going before the General Assembly and trying to make a cogent argument about should not governance be at the local level, because that's where the expectations and accountability lies, and then being dismissed because we didn't have compelling data to say how the economy would be Virginia would be negatively impacted when they didn't share any data. And they still don't share any data. On the other hand, I've also been a superintendent that got frustrated and decided that with our board that we can find a different way to kind of deal with what is obviously absent in the law. On good cause, it's clear on 1, 2, and 4. It's intentionally vague on innovative. Now imagine initially, because they wanted to make certain it was wide open. But in doing so, being wide open, it leads to lots of discretion, except that in the discussions that take place in the General Assembly, by kind of a de facto approach, they define what innovative is. They call it time. When you began your case today, and I want to talk about this issue that I'm not going to talk about the parts, because you said you wanted this to be voted on or down as a whole. So I'm only speaking for myself now. So with that being the case, I began to kind of look at, so what is the cause issue that you could make? The others are real clear, 1, 2, and 4. They give you examples of what that is. On 3, though, it doesn't. And so the issue for me, really, when you started this, you made, I thought, one was a governance issue, we've talked about, and the other one was on achievement gap. You can make a compelling case on the achievement gap for the whole if what you're talking about really does align that something's going to be significantly different to help all kids, especially to narrow the achievement gap, and that achievement gap exists across the system. But what I did not hear was what would the intervention be that is radically different from now. And I'm not asking you to tell me what that is, but I didn't see it. So I would say that under the good cause issue, what we do know, the research says that if kids start behind and there's a gap, you have to have high quality teachers, the best teachers in the places. So but that doesn't require really time. But what it was absent in this is that how do kids catch up if they really don't have time to catch up? Doing it earlier doesn't mean catch up. We do know this, that children and families that have means, and I'm not talking about being rich, but just have means, they expose kids to lots of things that they bring to school that makes them more or less ready, more ready. There are other families may have means, but the kids don't come prepared. And then there are others that don't have means and they don't have exposure. So how do you deal with that issue? And what I was looking for is, what is the transformative kind of thing that is different, that gets at the cause issue about the achievement gap? And what research says, outside of quality teachers, it's time. There's this regression in the summer, and the regression is, for kids who are families of means, they compensate for it. So the regression is not, it's a flat line. But where families don't engage their kids in academic or co-curricular kinds of work, and they allow them to stay at home and play with, play is fine, but they have regression. So when they come back to school, they start behind and they never get a chance to catch up. I was just so frustrated before the General Assembly decided to back away from the literacy passport test, because I was one of the ones that said, force us to make it different. And I couldn't do it with our board because it was too easy to have an out. So I was pretty ticked off. I didn't talk to Pat then, but I was ticked off, because I wanted us to be held accountable so the kids just didn't go on, because we hurt them. So I would say, for me, this good cause issue it falls lacking as a system. Your lead statements were compelling, and there's data to support it. What was missing is, so what's the intervention? And taking the test early is not the intervention. It's just early. So that's what I'm looking for in terms of the cause, especially if you deal with this as the body of the proposal being the whole and not its parts.
Just to respond to that, Dr. Kennedy, and I certainly appreciate your insight into this waiver request. We're not asking to take any test early. What I am asking is, by moving this 2 weeks, this is 2 weeks, we will begin in August our instructional year in preparation for any testing that is going on throughout the school year, which our colleagues in other parts of our state do, and obviously private schools do. And they outperform us on many of these same measures. So we're asking for not an additional amount of time. We already have one of the longest school days in the state. And we have not belabored what goes on in the summer in our school system, because these very children that you were talking about, some of our students are in essence in year-round school because of opportunities that we provide families all year long, realizing the very dynamics that you mentioned that comes to any school system, not just ours. And I'm sure that's true of the school systems in the areas that you represent also. So that was not a part of our application because that's a given, and we're constantly looking for more and more opportunities to involve. We've actually pleaded. It's interesting, the gentleman was here from the Richmond Retail Merchants Association, and Nancy Thomas has done an outstanding job in assisting us in finding meaningful internships and mentoring programs for students in some of our special education programs. We are pleading to our community at large. We need jobs for ours, just like you do in your communities, for our students in the summertime. We need apprenticeship programs. We need internship programs for our students. We recognize all of this to help our children or our students achieve and have a goal for achievement in school. So I just want to make sure that, because we have come before you before and asked about flexibility in when we give the test. We're not that is not a part of this request at all. We will stay within the testing schedule that we have, but we want our 2 weeks not at the end. And I have been there. I mean, as an elementary, now high school principal is a different ball of wax because they're giving exams in those last 2 weeks, and they don't have buildings full of kids. If your middle school is smart, they're also giving end-of-the-year exams during that time, trying to keep students focused on being in school. Elementary school, yes, we may be teaching a novel or we're doing whatever, but we're a holding tank for these students. And it is, to me, is not the best use of those 10 days. I can give you far more and better instructional use of those 10 days on the front end of the school year and not the back of it.
Dr. Kennedy, follow up?
I really do, as my colleagues have said, appreciate that you're concerned about raising the boat for every, and a boat's not a good analogy, but raising the expectations for every child. And that's not just words only. But it still does beg the question about how do we do this if we don't give kids not only high quality, opportunities to learn, but high quality time and additional time in instruction. And that's the area that I'm still kind of struggling with on this. Not the whole notion that you should be allowed to make a decision locally. And I'm hoping that during my lifetime, we won't have these conversations over.
If I may, President Foss, just
Please.
to address Dr. Kennedy's, one of the things that we are so concerned about is the restrictions that our calendar now puts on Henrico County for innovation programs. And let me share with you a program we shared with the board last week. We've already gone out to the Henrico Education Foundation, and it came about by Senator Stosh and myself and others having a conversation. And we've now proposed, but we can't do it, to go to a 12-month school, both at the elementary and middle school, that would provide not an alternative or substitute calendar like we had in Hampton, but a true 12-month. And the motivation behind it was to reduce the remediation that kids needed to take from the high school to college. But we can't do that now because we're not allowed to start prior to Labor Day, and we'd have to come before you again, ask for a waiver, and go through the whole process again. So it actually is a restriction to the innovation.
That might be a year-round school, of course.
Well, it's different than year-round because, again, that's more of an alternative calendar. This is truly a calendar that allows kids to go to school 12 months a year and has that. But that's part of the fabric. And again, this will be part of our applications we updated because this has been very helpful to us to allow for you to know, again, the things, the restrictions you may have, but the opportunities that we may have to work together on this.
You might want to try us on that one. But
Try us on that one.
given the one we have today, I want to turn to Mrs. Atkinson.
I had the rare opportunity of being at the department before this was legislated, when the superintendent actually had the authority to grant waivers. But I know why it became legislated, because we were granting too many waivers in the eyes of the General Assembly. So the statute is very prescriptive. And our authority as a board is tied to the opportunities in the statute. So I like to color within the lines, and unfortunately, they've given us very dark lines here. And so as I look at the statute, I would agree about the application to the middle and elementary schools. I don't see that in your application. The case sits there, and I don't think we have the authority under this provision of the statute to grant that. But I also have a concern. You've talked about innovation in broad terms, but for us to grant this, it has to be an innovative or experimental program. And while I understand the program that you started a year ago and will be offering, but the second hoop that we have to jump through appears to say that that program has to have been approved by the Department of Education pursuant to the regulations of the board's standards of accreditation. I don't see that here either. And so when I look at checking the boxes that I could check in order to grant it, I just don't see them here. Does that mean that I don't want Henrico County to have the ability to set their calendar? Not at all. It just means that as a board member, I'm restricted by the authority that's been delegated to us for waivers to the language in the statute.
Mrs. Sears?
You had mentioned the fact of the private schools outperform you on the tests because they start earlier. And so I'm wondering if I have to assume that what you're saying is the sole reason that you are outperformed is because they start earlier.
No, I was mentioning in particular with the AP test, because they do have opportunities to actually sit and practice taking the test before the tests are actually administered. And with us not having those 10 days, we don't have that opportunity. We teach right up to it. It's a very, and just like a college, of course, that's the way it's designed to be, and that this is the day the exam is given, and we don't give practice exams on it. We're limited by the calendar in doing that because we want our students to achieve 3s, 4s, and 5s. We want every student, if able, in our high schools to take at least one AP course because the research says that the students who have this successful experience with one AP course have a better chance of staying in college once they get there. So that's the differentiation I was making there as a reason that they may outperform us. We do very well, Mrs. Sears, as like Mr. Bronlich has mentioned. When you look at our data is very compelling as far as the achievement of our school system is concerned. We are not satisfied with that. We can do better than that, and we want all of our students to do better than that, and that's why we are coming before you asking for this. I wonder what your response would be if you looked at our achievement data and we were in the tank on everything.
Same thing. It's the same statute, has to be the same. Yeah. If I understood, I'm sorry, Mrs. Mack, did you raise your hand? Please.
I just wanted to say while your rationale was very compelling, and as a former elementary principal, I can relate to the 10 last days being holding tank. I'd have to agree with my colleagues. It's just not a strong enough case for the elementary and middle, so I'd like to see that.
If I understood correctly, Mr. Montgomery, and I'll make sure this is unanimous, you wish to have this resolved all or nothing, all the schools or none. And if I am hearing my colleagues correctly, we have an overwhelming majority, if not unanimity, who believe that there is no basis in the statute on which we could legally, acting legally, grant a waiver at the elementary and middle school level. Now, if I were in your shoes, as I once was, at least two of your sets of shoes, I might prefer that we resolve this today, given that next month is June, so I could get on with planning the calendars. But as a due process fan and lawyer, I'm always eager to hear, do you think there's something you can bring back to the table on that next month, not to exclusion of the other issues we face, and there are a lot of them here, that might change that calculation?
Yes, sir. The application would actually go into 2014, so it's not an immediate need to change the calendar by any means. But the feedback you've given us, I think, is critically important, and we believe, and I believe, we will give you, I think, a lot more substantive data and information relative to the concerns you have as building the case for elementary through middle to high school. So, yes, I believe the superintendent's recommendation was to receive feedback and then come back to you with a revised application based on that feedback that we received from you, and we'd like to move forward with that.
Okay. And another possibility, of course, too, is bring it back at a different date. We don't have to bring it back next month either if you want to keep working with us on it, but let me see where my colleagues are. I'm just laying out the options we have here. I think I heard Mr. Kopika just say he's fine with coming back after you've absorbed all this. How do others feel about it? Is that up? Okay, well, I think we have had a good discussion, and I think we feel that we should do what we normally do and bring this back later for final review. Certainly the superintendent and staff and I are all available to hear what your thinking is on this, because I don't want to waste your time with it either, where the law confines us in a way we can't do anything that we might even want to do. But I hope you'll import all this into your thinking, come back if you do with some answers to these things, and then we will make our best judgment about what we can do within the confines of the current Code of Virginia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, board members, for very good discussion. That takes us to